Did you know that the end of your story is more important than the beginning? There's 3 reasons for this, and I'll give you the first one right now. It's because the difference between the beginning of a story and the end of a story is what gives a story its meaning. I'll say that again. It's because the difference between the beginning of a story and the end of a story is what gives a story its meaning. This is why some people, after they finish reading a book or watching a movie, will look for a video essay that can explain the ending. Because if they didn't understand the ending, then they didn't understand the story. They didn't understand the meaning of the story. And they know that if they could get an explanation of the ending of the story, they'd be able to understand the whole story's meaning. They'll be able to understand what the story was trying to say. Because one of the major features of a story that differentiates it from, say, any other collected series of sentences is that the selected events and ideas are connected together in a logical, sense-making way. 2 of the worst things a story can be is confusing and illogical. So if the ending is confusing and illogical, it's not a good ending, and it's not a good story. And this doesn't mean that endings shouldn't be ambiguous or absurd, because there is a way to logically arrive at an ambiguous or absurd ending. But if you're writing a novel, you've heard that the first line on the first page of the first chapter is the most important part of your story, because it's absolutely vital for hooking the reader and making them turn the page. Because if you start off poorly, they'll put down the book right. They'll never make it anywhere near the end of your story. But all of that just means that the start of the story is the most important part to you, the writer, or your agent or editor or publisher, because you want people to read your book. But the truth is, the start of your story is the part that is least important to your reader. It's the point where they care the least about your story. They're not emotionally invested at the beginning. They're still deciding whether or not they care. And of course you want them to care, so you work really hard on the beginning. You can agonize over the first part of your story for so long, writing and rewriting it for such a long time that you never move on. You're working so hard to polish the start of the story that maybe you haven't gotten anywhere near the middle or the end. You don't even have a complete first draft. But as I'm going to explain in the rest of this video, having a bad ending is actually way worse than having a bad beginning. And taking some time to work on the ending of your story is actually going to do a lot to help you write it, so that the entirety of the story actually exists at all in the first place. Because why are you agonizing over the first impression your story is going to make on the reader, when there's not even a first draft in existence for them to read? You don't have a first draft, so you don't have a reader. You are worrying about things and addressing them in the wrong order. So if you've already suffered a lot over the beginning of your story, take this as a sign to leave what you've got alone for now and move on. If you have intentions to query your manuscript to an agent or an editor to get traditionally published, or even if you want to self-publish, just get used to the idea that you will be fine-tuning the beginning of your story for a long time to come. So move on for now and work on something else. Give some attention to the end of your story. Because here's reason 2 for why the end of your story is more important than the beginning. A bad ending is way worse than a bad beginning. You probably intuitively understand this from your own experience. A bad ending always feels way worse. Like I said earlier, when your reader is at the start of the story, they're still deciding whether or not to get emotionally invested. They're still deciding whether or not they care. So when your reader gets to the end of page 1 or chapter 1, and they decide that they didn't really like what they saw, they can put the book down and walk away, and often it's not an emotionally charged experience. If they're disappointed, it'll only be from the impression they got from the book cover, or the blurb, or the reviews, or what other people have been saying about it. But they didn't waste a lot of time. And the function of the beginning of the story is only to pique the reader's interest and draw them into the rest of the story. It's their first impression of you as the author. If they don't like the start of your story, it's actually very good that they receive the signals to put your book down as fast as possible. The reason why people don't read past the start of your story is because the book just isn't right for them. And it's usually at least one of these 3 things. It's not up to their standards, it's not to their taste, or they just don't trust you. They don't trust that you'll tell a satisfying story. Of course, it's not wrong to hope that readers will give you a chance, or readers that don't typically enjoy your genre or style try to expand their horizons. There's definitely not anything wrong with trying something new, but maybe you're just not going to be the author that convinces them or converts them. And if a book isn't right for someone, why would you hope that they read it? There's millions of books and stories in the world, and that number is only increasing every day. Why are you hoping to hold readers hostage to your book? If they want to go, just let them go. So the worst case scenario for a bad beginning is only that you don't get the readers that you want. And why should you have them if you don't deserve them? Or you disappoint the readers' expectations. But like I said, disappointing readers in the beginning isn't that bad, relatively speaking. It's definitely way worse to disappoint them in the end. When we're talking about the end of a story, we're talking about the final act. This could include the climactic sequence, the climactic moment, or the denouement, which is the falling action or the aftermath of the climactic moment. For the entire length of your story, you have been building your readers' expectations for what's going to happen at the end. And if they do arrive at the end, now this is the part that's most important to them, because now they're emotionally invested. Now they care. If you can't close it out with a strong ending after your reader has spent hours getting emotionally invested in your story, unlike disappointing them in the beginning, disappointing them now would have seriously wasted their time. Imagine you had an acquaintance who you've only known for less than 24 hours. Or you met a stranger and exchanged maybe 2 sentences with them. And then this person asked to buy a significant sum of money, but they really pinky promised that they would pay you back. When they don't pay you back, how do you feel? And yeah, it would feel bad, but like, shame on you for deciding to trust them, right? Or maybe you thought the risk was interesting, and you think what just happened is kind of funny, and now you have an amusing story you can tell people. So you did kind of get something out of it after all. But if someone you'd known for a long time, like a family member or a friend you've had for years, someone who you've trusted with money or all sorts of other things before, and they've paid you back before, they've kept their promises, and they ask for money one more time, and then they completely let you down, how do you feel? That wouldn't just be disappointment, that would be betrayal. Think of the people that get to the end of your story, who trusted you for this long and believed all the promises that you've made, and bought into the expectations that you've set up. If you betray them at the end with your bad ending, do you think they'll recommend your book to other people? Do you think they'll want to read your next book? What kind of reviews do you think they'll leave? What kind of things do you think they'll walk around saying to other people? You could probably think of some stories you've read or seen where the ending was just awful. The story didn't go where you thought it was going to go. You thought the writer was taking you somewhere. A place where all the characters and the plot points and the foreshadowing all interconnected with each other perfectly. But that's not where the writer ends up taking you. You end up in a place completely different. And there are even some stories where the ending is so bad, you just want to wipe your brain of ever having read that story. You literally never want to think of it again. And I was going to talk here about what would make a good ending, but I decided that was out of scope of this video. So I'll talk about that another time. For now, let's move on to the third reason. The third reason why the end of your story is more important than the beginning is a reason for writers in particular. It's that the ending of a story determines all of the events that could happen in the middle. The middle of a story is notoriously the most difficult part to write for most writers. And it's also the largest part of basically every story. Most of a story is the middle of the story. So if you get lost or you can't think of what kind of events should happen in the middle of the story, consider the ending. The stronger the vision you have for the ending of your story, the easier it'll be to deduce, like a detective, the events that happen in the middle. If you haven't given too much thought about what's going to happen at the end of your story, or you only have a very vague idea of how things are going to wrap up, it wouldn't be surprising that the middle of your story also feels very vague, and you're not having a very easy time writing it. If you want steps to take or directions to act on, you need a clear idea of the end. And I'm not saying that you have to set in stone what the ending is going to be before you start writing. Of course, you can always make adjustments and change your mind during the writing process. But if you want directions, like from Google Maps, then you have to input point A and point B. You need the place you're starting and the place you're going to end up. Google Maps isn't going to give you directions if you don't tell it where you're trying to go. You need some idea of where you're going. Even if once you're on the road, you make pit stops and take detours. and decide that your original destination isn't actually where you want to end up after all. So if you have a writing project you've stepped away from for a while because you're struggling to write it, now could be a good time to open it up again and take a look with fresh eyes. If there's a particular meaning or message that you wanted to convey with this story, think about how you can communicate that with the details in the difference between the beginning of the story and the end of the story. Or if you don't want to lock in any particular ending just yet, brainstorm a few different possibilities and see how big and small variations change the meaning of the story in big or small ways. The more specific you can be about the ending, the better. So here's some things to think about regarding your ending. Who's there? Who's not there? What's everyone doing or trying to do? What are they successfully doing or failing to do? Where are they? Indoors, outdoors, in private, in public? In an exposed place or a secret place? A familiar place or an unfamiliar place? When is the ending? During the day? During the night? Years later, after the beginning? Months later? 30 days later? What's the final feeling of the major characters? Are they satisfied, dissatisfied, regretful, optimistic, devastated? How do you want the reader to feel at the very end of your story? In the next video, we'll talk about how you can deduce the events in the middle of your story from the beginning and the ending. We'll get you those directions. See you then.